What would you do if 14 enemy fighters suddenly locked onto you and there was nowhere left to run? In 1944, the P-51 Mustang was called a flying coffin until one rookie pilot turned it into a legend. In just 3 brutal minutes, he didn't just survive, he shook the entire sky. Another aerial combat story awaits you. Don't look away because what you're about to hear feels impossible. March 6, 1944. A lone P-51 Mustang tears across the German sky at 400 miles per hour with 14 Luftwaffe fighters closing in from every direction. The pilot is just 22 years old, and he has been in combat for exactly 9 days. In the next 3 minutes, he is about to challenge everything pilots believe about survival. The air war over Europe in early 1944 isn't strategy, it's math. Cold, brutal, written in blood. Hundreds of American bombers pushed deep into Germany in tight formations, sometimes 500 aircraft at a time, each carrying 10 men. And they are dying. The 8th Air Force is losing crews at a rate that makes commanders physically sick. On some missions, 1 out of every 4 bombers never returns. Do the math at that rate, surviving 25 missions is nearly impossible. The problem is range. The P-47 Thunderbolt can escort the bombers, but only part way. Fuel runs low, gauges drop, and the fighters are forced to turn back. The bombers keep going alone. That's when the Germans strike. Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs wait in the gaps like wolves, patient and precise, attacking the moment the escorts disappear. Engineers try everything. Drop tanks, extra fuel, lighter weight, but nothing solves the problem. The bombers need a fighter that can go all the way to Berlin and back. Then comes the P-51 Mustang. On paper, it's a breakthrough, a Rolls-Royce Merlin engine and a sleek wing that slices through the air with efficiency. It's fast, long range, and exactly what the bombers need. But pilots don't trust it. They call it a widowmaker. The canopy creates deadly blind spots. The fuel system can fail at altitude, and the landing gear can collapse on rough airstrips. It's fast, but unforgiving. Still, it's the only answer, so it goes to war. One of the new pilots is Second Lieutenant Robert Johnson, a 22-year-old farm boy from Iowa. He arrives in England in February 1944 with 200 flight hours and 0 combat experience. His orders are simple: stay close to your leader, learn, and don't try to be a hero. Because new pilots who try to be heroes don't last long. On March 5th, his squadron is assigned a maximum range escort mission deep into Germany. Before dawn, engines roar to life and Mustangs roll into the dark sky. They climb through thick cloud and break into sunlight at 15,000 feet, joining hundreds of bombers stretching across the horizon. The formation turns east. Germany waits. 2 hours into the mission, the radio crackles enemy fighters inbound. The sky erupts into chaos. Tracers streak across the air as German fighters dive in fire and break away. Johnson follows his leader through hard turns, scanning in every direction. A Focke-Wulf flashes past his canopy, so close he sees the pilot's face. Then everything disappears into cloud, and his leader is gone. Johnson calls out, no answer. He checks his fuel, half a tank. Protocol is clear. If you're alone, you go home. He turns west, leaving the fight behind. 10 minutes pass in silence. Then he sees them, 14 German fighters circling a crippled B 17 trailing smoke and falling behind the formation. The Germans attack one at a time, calm and methodical, finishing the kill. Johnson watches for a moment, his fuel gauge steady at half. Procedure says, go home. Logic says go home. Math says 1 fighter against 14 is suicide. He hesitates. Then he pushes the throttle forward and dives. What would you do in his place? Turn back and live or dive straight into 14 enemy fighters, knowing the odds are almost zero. In that moment, there's no time to think, only to choose. If this story gripped you and you want to see what happens next, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and don't miss the next part. Robert Johnson grew up in a place where pedigree didn't matter, only what you could fix with your hands. Central Iowa was flat, endless farmland where work defined everything. His family ran a small farm with hogs, grain, and dairy cows. Robert, the quiet middle child, found his purpose early in machines. His father owned a worn-out 1932 Ford tractor that broke down constantly. With no money for repairs, 12-year-old Robert taught himself to fix it. By lamplight, he studied manuals, spread parts across the kitchen table, cleaned them, rebuilt them, and somehow made the machine run again. Then it kept running. Soon his father stopped calling the town mechanic. By 16, Robert was fixing equipment for neighbors' tractors, trucks, threshers, earning a reputation as fast, reliable, and cheap. He saved every dollar in a coffee can under his bed. 20 miles away, a small grass airstrip offered something he couldn't ignore. One summer day in 1938, he paid $1, climbed into a Travel Air biplane, and felt the moment the wheels left the earth. The world below shrank into patterns. The horizon stretched forever. The noise, the wind, the power, it changed him. He came back every weekend, spending everything he earned just to fly again. The barnstormer who ran the strip, a World War I veteran, noticed the quiet kid who never missed a day. He offered Johnson a deal, work the airfield in exchange for flying lessons. Johnson accepted instantly. He soloed after 8 hours, earned his license at 17, and by 18, had a commercial ticket. He flew cargo, mail, and anything that paid. He learned navigation by instinct, weather by experience, and survival by necessity. When engines failed at altitude, he figured things out fast or didn't come back. Then came December 7th, 1941. Johnson heard about Pearl Harbor over a radio in a hangar. The next morning, he enlisted. When the recruiter saw his logbook, Johnson was immediately placed into Army Air Forces training. He expected to be thrown into combat, but instead, he was refined: more hours, more aircraft, more discipline. He flew T-6 Texans and P-40 Warhawks, trained in gunnery formation aerobatics. He wasn't flashy, but he was dependable, the kind of pilot instructors trusted. By summer 1943, he earned his commission as the war intensified. Europe was burning, and the demand for pilots was endless. In February 1944, Johnson arrived in England and joined the 357th Fighter Group, flying the new P-51 Mustang. The unit was fresh. Everyone was learning the aircraft, the tactics, the enemy. His squadron was a mix of America farm boys, city kids, a crop duster, a college student quoting Hemingway. Different backgrounds, same reality, none of them had seen combat. The veterans who briefed them didn't sugarcoat anything. Air combat wasn't clean or heroic. It was chaos. Dogfights broke apart in seconds. You rarely saw what killed you. You focused on the target ahead, while someone else lined up behind you. Survive 5 missions, they said, and your odds improved. Most never did. Johnson listened carefully, taking in every word. The advice was simple and brutal. Check your six constantly. Never fly straight for more than 10 seconds. If your engine is hit, dive for cloud cover. If you're on fire, bail out. If you're too low, land anywhere you can. And if there's no field, aim for trees. Because in this war, even how you crash could decide whether you lived or died. He flew his first combat mission on February 28th, and nothing happened. 8 hours in the cockpit, escorting bombers in and out, watching them drop their payloads, then turning for home. No enemy fighters, no gunfire, just tension. When he landed, he had barely 10 minutes of fuel left. His hands shook as he climbed out 7 straight hours of adrenaline, finally crashing. The next 3 missions were the same: long, cold, silent, every second stretched tight with anticipation. Then came March 5th, the mission to the ball bearing plant. The moment everything changed, the separation, the crippled bomber, the German fighters circling like predators, and Johnson making a decision that broke every rule he had been taught. To understand that moment, you have to understand the crisis behind it. By early 1944, the 8th Air Force was facing a chain of failures. American doctrine assumed bomber formations could defend themselves. In theory, tight formations of B-17 created overlapping fields of .50 caliber fire, a defensive wall no fighter could penetrate. On paper, it worked. In reality, the Luftwaffe proved otherwise. German fighters attacked head-on from high altitude at closing speeds over 600 miles per hour. The bombers couldn't track them fast enough. Cannons tore through cockpits and fuel tanks before gunners could react. The wall of fire simply didn't exist where it mattered most. At the same time, escort fighters couldn't go far enough. The P-47 Thunderbolt was powerful and durable, but it burned fuel too quickly. Even with drop tanks, it could only escort bombers to the edge of Germany. Beyond that point, the death zone, the bombers were alone, and the Luftwaffe knew exactly where to wait. The losses were catastrophic. In October 1943 alone, over 200 bombers were destroyed, along with thousands of trained crewmen. Replacing them took months. Losing them took minutes. By the end of the year, planners realized the truth at current loss rates. The 8th Air Force would collapse within 6 months. Solutions were tested. The P-47 was pushed to its limits, but physics wouldn't bend any further. The P-38 Lightning had range, but failed in the freezing conditions at high-altitude engines, malfunctioning cockpits, turning into ice boxes, pilots returning with frostbite. It wasn't the answer. That left one option: the P-51 Mustang. Originally designed with an Allison engine, the Mustang had been fast but ineffective at altitude. Then engineers installed the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. The transformation was dramatic. Now it could fly higher, faster, farther, over 400 miles per hour, above 40,000 feet, all the way to Berlin and back. It was exactly what the war needed. But it came with flaws. The fuel system was complex and unforgiving. Switch tanks at the wrong time, and the engine could die instantly. The canopy created blind spots that hid enemy fighters until it was too late. The landing gear was fragile, prone to collapse on rough airstrips. Early combat reports were mixed. Some Mustangs were lost to enemy fire, others to mechanical failure. Some simply vanished without a trace. Pilots complained. Some asked to go back to the P-47. The answer was no. Because despite its flaws, the Mustang could do one thing no other aircraft could. It could stay with the bombers deep into enemy territory inside the death zone. There was no alternative. So the Mustangs kept flying, and pilots like Robert Johnson learned quickly, because in this war, learning slowly meant not surviving at all. Before we continue, I'm curious, where are you watching this story from? Right now, are you in the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, Australia, Canada, or somewhere else? Drop your country or city in the comments, and let's see how far this story from 1944 has traveled across the world. By March 1944, only 3 fighter groups had converted to the P-51, and the 357th Fighter Group was the newest, barely operational, still learning the aircraft, the tactics, and the enemy. Their early missions were little more than shakedowns. Robert Johnson's squadron had flown just 6 combat missions. On the 7th, he found himself alone. His element leader vanished into cloud during a chaotic fight. Johnson climbed, searched, called on the radio, nothing. Protocol was clear: go home. Separated pilots were dead pilots. The rule existed for a reason. Then he saw the bomber. A B-17 trailed smoke, 2 engines gone, falling behind the formation. 14 German fighters circled it, attacking one at a time, calm, methodical, certain. The gunners fired back tracers arcing into the sky, but there were too many attackers, too many angles. The bomber was dying slowly. Johnson checked his fuel half-tanks. Enough to get home, not enough for a long fight. 10 men were inside that aircraft, watching death line up for them. He did the math. 1 P-51 against 14 fighters. Suicide. Then he stopped thinking and dove. He dropped from 28,000 to 15,000 feet. In seconds, the Mustang screaming past 400 knots, the airframe shaking, wind tearing over the canopy. He leveled out behind a Focke-Wulf that never saw him. He fired. 6.50 caliber guns roared. The German fighter disintegrated and spiraled down. Now they saw him. 2 Bf-109s broke toward him. Johnson climbed, rolled, reversed, using speed to pull them away from the bomber. He let them chase, stretched the distance, then snapped back. 1 overshot. Johnson fired. The fighter ignited. The pilot bailed out. The other broke away. The bomber was still there, but so were the rest. 12 fighters now regrouping, angry. 4 turned toward him. Every instinct said run. He turned into them instead. Full throttle, head on. They fired first. He waited. At the last second, he fired and rolled under them. They scattered. 1 trailed smoke. The bomber dove into cloud. Johnson followed. So did the Germans. Inside the cloud, nothing. No horizon, no visibility, only instruments. He flew blind, knowing enemies were seconds away. Breaking out below, he saw the bomber again, still limping west. Seconds later, the fighters emerged behind him. 8 now, some damaged, most still lethal. They attacked again. This time, it was close, violent, chaotic. Tracers filled the sky. His windscreen cracked. Bullets tore into his wing. Hydraulic fluid sprayed across the cockpit. Controls grew heavy. He ignored it, kept fighting. He shot 1 enemy at point-blank range. Another dropped out, trailing smoke. His ammunition ran low, seconds left. He lined up 1 more target, fired, hit. The fighter fell away. Then silence. His guns clicked, empty. The Germans didn't know. Johnson turned toward them anyway, pretending he could still fire. The bluff worked. They broke away, unwilling to risk it. One by one, they disengaged low on fuel, low on ammunition. Too many losses for one American pilot. Johnson watched them go, hands shaking, heart hammering. Below him, the B-17 was still flying. He formed up beside it. The waist gunner waved. Johnson waved back. They flew together for 20 minutes until the English coast appeared. The bomber was safe. Johnson peeled away, heading for home. His fuel gauge was near empty. Hydraulics were gone. He radioed ahead, no flaps, no brakes. The runway came into view. He dropped the gear manually, hoping it would lock. He came in fast, hit hard. The wheels held. The Mustang rolled with no brakes faster and farther until he cut the engine and let it coast to a stop just short of a fence. He sat there for a moment, breathing alive. Ground crews ran up and stared at the aircraft. 43 holes, torn wings, shattered glass, hydraulic fluid everywhere. They asked how he made it back. Johnson didn't answer. He climbed out slowly, legs shaking, and leaned against the wing. Someone asked how many he shot down. Johnson didn't know. He hadn't been counting. All he knew was that 10 men in that bomber were going home, and that was enough. His squadron commander found him an hour later and pulled him into debrief. He listened carefully, asked questions, took notes. When Johnson finished, the room went quiet. The commander studied him for a moment, then said he was being recommended for the Distinguished Service Cross. Johnson just shrugged. He had done what needed to be done. Then the commander added something else. Intelligence confirmed that 14 German fighters had engaged a single P-51. At least 6 were destroyed. 3 more likely. The rest fled. The entire fight lasted 3 minutes. 3 minutes against 14 enemies, and he didn't just survive, he won. The commander asked him how. Johnson thought about it, then gave the only answer he had: the Mustang. The aircraft everyone had doubted. The one they called a Deathtrap. It gave him speed when he needed it, maneuverability when it mattered, and strength when rounds tore through it. It kept flying. It kept fighting. It brought him home. The commander nodded, and the story began to spread. Not exaggerated, not embellished. The gun camera footage proved every second of it. 1 pilot, 14 fighters, 3 minutes. Suddenly, no one was mocking the Mustang anymore. What Johnson did wasn't planned. He hadn't set out to prove anything. But the footage changed everything. For years, fighter tactics had been built on assumptions, lessons from earlier wars, from France, Spain, Britain. The belief was simple: a lone fighter couldn't survive against overwhelming numbers. Speed had limits. Maneuvers had limits. Aircraft had limits. Johnson's footage shattered those ideas. It showed him pulling turns at speeds that should have locked the controls, diving beyond safe limits, climbing where the aircraft should have stalled, and the Mustang held together. The wings stayed intact. The controls responded. The engine kept delivering power. Engineers studied the film frame by frame. They saw the aircraft performing beyond expectations, pulling extreme G-forces, diving past redline, rolling faster than test data suggested possible. One engineer summed it up in a memo: the P-51 could do more than they believed. It wasn't the aircraft limiting pilots, it was the pilots limiting themselves. The Army Air Forces listened. New tactical guidance followed. Pilots were cleared to push harder, faster, dives, tighter turns, more aggressive maneuvering. The Mustang could take it. The proof was there. But the biggest change wasn't mechanical. It was psychological. Before this doctrine said that outnumbered fighters should disengage, survive, and return. The math supported it. Johnson ignored that and won. His commander began asking why the Germans broke off. They had the advantage, numbers, position, momentum. Yet they fled. The answer was simple shock. In 3 minutes, they had watched 6 of their own fall. They had faced a pilot who attacked instead of running, who turned into them instead of away, who fought as if the numbers didn't matter. It made them hesitate. And in air combat, hesitation kills. From that came a new idea, calculated aggression. Not reckless, but deliberate. Attack when the enemy expects you to retreat. Force them to react. Force doubt into their decisions. Because doubt spreads faster than bullets. Fighter groups began teaching it. Pilots learned to exploit the Mustang's strength, speed, climb maneuverability, and to control the fight instead of reacting to it. The results were immediate. Losses began to drop. The Luftwaffe was still dangerous, still skilled, but something had shifted. Johnson's 3 minutes in the sky were studied across England. Pilots analyzed every frame of his gun camera footage. They saw how he never flew straight for long, constantly changing direction, forcing enemies to adjust. They saw how he used altitude, turning the fight vertical instead of horizontal, where numbers mattered less and energy mattered more. And they learned. Because in that fight, the one pilot didn't just save a bomber, he changed how the war in the air was fought. Before we move on, I'm curious. Does anyone in your family have a connection to World War II? Maybe a grandfather, great-grandparent, or relative who served in the air, on the ground, or at sea? Share their story. Or where they served in the comments. These stories deserve to be remembered. By June 1944, the P-51 was no longer a mocked death trap. It had become the premier American fighter in Europe. Pilots now requested transfers into Mustang units. The reputation had completely flipped. It wasn't just about range anymore. It was about speed, power, and survival. Even P-47 pilots began to grumble. They wanted Mustangs. They wanted what the aircraft could give them in a fight. Robert Johnson, once the inexperienced new pilot, became a training officer. He stood in briefing rooms and walked fresh pilots through his engagement frame by frame, second by second. He didn't glorify it. He broke it down. He explained why he attacked, how he managed speed and altitude, and where he made mistakes. Because there were mistakes. He pointed them out himself. The moments he got too slow, the angles he misjudged, the risks he didn't fully see in the moment. The new pilots listened carefully. They asked the same questions every time. How did you stay calm? How did you track 14 fighters? How did you know when to fight and when to break away? Johnson's answers were simple. You don't track 14. You track one, the one in front of your guns. When it's gone, you find the next. You don't solve the whole problem. You solve the immediate one, then the next. As for fear, he told them the truth. You are not calm. You are terrified. But you fly anyway. Fear doesn't stop you. It sharpens you. It keeps you alive. His briefings were recorded, copied, and sent across units, even to the Pacific. The principles held everywhere: aggression, energy, management, unpredictability. They weren't just tactics, they were mindset. And the enemy noticed. German pilots began reporting a change. American fighters were no longer defensive. They didn't break off easily. They pressed attacks even when outnumbered. They forced engagements instead of avoiding them. Luftwaffe commanders responded. They told their pilots to strike the bombers and avoid prolonged fights with Mustangs. But that was easier said than done. The P-51s stayed close now. They didn't chase every target. They guarded the bombers. And when the Germans attacked, the Mustangs turned into them, disrupting braking formations, forcing chaos. The effect was immediate. The bombing campaign, which had nearly collapsed in late 1943, became sustainable. Losses dropped. Crews survived long enough to complete their missions. Morale improved. And deep inside Germany, factories burned. Oil fields burned. Rail yards burned. The system began to break. Johnson's 3-minute fight didn't win the war, but it changed how the war in the air was fought. It proved the aircraft. It shifted doctrine. It gave other pilots something more powerful than orders confidence. Johnson himself flew 73 more missions. He shot down 6 more enemy aircraft. He earned the Distinguished Service Cross, the Silver Star, and multiple Distinguished Flying Crosses. Yet he rarely spoke about it. Years later, when someone asked why he attacked 14 fighters alone, his answer never changed. There were 10 men in that bomber. They had families. They wanted to go home. He could help. So he did. By the summer of 1944, the P-51 Mustang was in full production. Factories ran around the clock. Thousands rolled off assembly lines. Fighter groups across Europe converted as fast as they could. The numbers told the story. Mustang units achieved kill ratios of 5-to-1, then 8-to-1. The Luftwaffe was losing experienced pilots faster than it could replace them. And the mission itself evolved. The Mustang's range allowed something new, not just escort, but offense. Fighter sweeps deep into Germany, hunting missions. P-51s flew ahead of bomber formations, searching for enemy airfields, catching fighters on takeoff, or landing when they were most vulnerable. They strafed runways, destroyed aircraft, on the ground burned fuel supplies. For the first time, the Luftwaffe had nowhere left to hide. In May 1944, a single P-51 group destroyed 67 German aircraft in one day, 23, in the air, 44 on the ground. The mission lasted 6 hours, reaching as far as Poland and back, something no other Allied fighter could do. That was the turning point. German commanders realized the Americans could strike anywhere. The skies over Germany were no longer safe. Luftwaffe pilots began refusing missions. Some defected, others simply stopped showing up. The will to fight began to collapse. By D-Day, June 6, 1944, the Allies owned the sky. Thousands of aircraft crossed into France in daylight with minimal resistance. The Luftwaffe tried to respond, but their attacks were scattered and ineffective. The P-51s were everywhere, patrolling, intercepting, dominating. Many German pilots saw them and turned back. Eisenhower later made it clear, without air superiority, the invasion would have failed. The beaches would have been a massacre. That dominance came from the ability to strike deep and eliminate threats before they could act. The Mustang made that possible. The same story unfolded in the Pacific. B-29 bombers had been flying long missions over Japan without escort, taking losses. In 1945, P-51s deployed close enough to accompany them. With drop tanks, they could finally reach Japan. The result was immediate. The Mustangs cleared the skies, and the bombers got through. By summer, Japanese air resistance had collapsed. American aircraft flew almost unchallenged. When the atomic bomb missions launched, they flew without escort because nothing was left to stop them. After the war, the Mustang faded from frontline service as jets took over. But it didn't disappear. It fought in Korea then, in smaller conflicts for decades. Some countries flew it into the 1980s. Few aircraft last that long. Then it found a new life. Air racing air shows restored warbirds. The sound of its engine became a symbol, something that stopped people in their tracks. For veterans, it brought back memories. For others, it told a story without words. Johnson's aircraft didn't survive. It was scrapped like thousands of others. But the film did. His gun camera footage still exists, watched by millions. Many don't know his name, but they see what he did. One pilot alone making a decision that echoed far beyond that moment. Because it wasn't just the machine. The P-51 gave him the ability, but Johnson made the choice. That choice changed tactics, shifted doctrine, and gave others the confidence to act when logic said, retreat. The tools have changed. Jets replaced propellers. Missiles replaced guns. But the principles remain: aggression, energy, unpredictability, courage. They are timeless. They once called the Mustang a death trap. Then one young pilot proved them wrong in 3 minutes against 14 fighters, and nothing in the sky was the same again. Robert Johnson returned home in the fall of 1945. The war was over. Europe was rebuilding. The Pacific had gone silent, and millions of men were trading uniforms for ordinary lives. Johnson went back to Iowa. The farm was still there, his parents older but relieved. There was work waiting: fences to mend, engines to fix a tractor that still broke down like it always had. He slipped back into that rhythm: quiet mornings, long days, the smell of soil and diesel replacing the sound of war. He never talked about it. Not to his family, not to neighbors. When people asked, he kept it short. Yes, he flew fighters. Yes, he saw combat. No, he didn't want to go into details. The local paper called him a hero, listed his medals, his victories. He read it once and never mentioned it again. He married in 1947, raised 3 children, and built a simple life as a mechanic and later a flight instructor. It was enough. Years passed. Korea came and went. Vietnam followed. Johnson watched from a distance, quiet as ever. When veterans groups invited him to speak, he declined. When historians reached out, he answered briefly, just facts, nothing more. He never saw himself as special. He had done his job. Others had done more. Many hadn't come home. Afterward, young pilots gathered around him asking about tactics, about survival, about fighting when outnumbered. He answered them all. Then one asked something different. How did you find the courage? Johnson looked at him and told the truth. You don't find courage. Courage is what you do when you're afraid, when everything tells you to run, and you act anyway because someone needs help, and you're there. Robert Johnson died in 2006 at 84 years old. His obituary was simple: father, grandfather, veteran. At his funeral, aircraft flew overhead. One broke formation and climbed into the sky. His medals, his logbook, his story remain, studied by pilots, remembered by those who understand. Because in the end, the lesson is simple. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is choosing to act anyway.